Actually, Lori worked harder than Bob, because Bob eventually did show up, and it wasn't so bad and everything else. And for all the people that donated some cookies and apple pie. Apple pie, I understand, even though I haven't tasted it, is very good. And with that thing, we'll put it back to you, and you can have people ask questions and everything else.
So I gotta tell you, this is the first time I've ever spoken to a group of neighbors. and the first time I've been asked to speak about myself. So it's a little different, right? I'm usually doing clinics or talking to kids or at work doing things related to work. So this will be a little different for me, but I'll give you an idea of what I've done and what we've done together over the last a few years. So the last game I ever pitched was in Japan, and I pitched 12 innings, and I lost 1-0. So today nobody pitches 12 innings, right? They take you out in the 6th inning or 7th inning, and sometimes even sooner, and they're trying to protect everybody's arms. That wasn't the case when I played. That wasn't the case when I finished playing, and it wasn't the case when I started playing either. Nobody thought about those kind of things, and I'm not judging anything or making any kind of statement on that. But in Japan, so I lost the game 1-0, so I was not happy. It was the last game of the year, and I lost 1-0. I didn't know it was going to be the last game of my career, but it was the last game that year, and I lost. So that's, for us, that's not a good thing. For the Japanese, they thought it was the best game I pitched all year. Because I pitched 12 innings and I gave my best effort for 12 innings and we lost the game. In the bottom of the 11th inning, it was 0-0, and we had the bases loaded and 2 outs. And I was the next batter, and I was standing there before I went up to bat, and I kept looking at our manager, why aren't you putting somebody up here to hit for me? Because in the league I was in Japan, there was no DH. There's 2 leagues there, just like the American and National League here. So one league had the DH and one league didn't. Ours didn't. And by that time, I hadn't hit in years. I think I had 1 or 2 hits while we were in Japan, but not much. So now I'm up there with the bases loaded. We had the best pinch hitter in Japanese baseball history sitting on the bench, and we didn't use him. So they sent me up there to bat because it was more important to them that I try and finish this game than us winning the game. So I'm just giving you, it was a different way to look at the game than we look at it. They want to win, but how you play was more important. So I went out there in the last inning, gave up a run and lost the game. After the game, they told me, so I'm thinking this could go on forever. I could be here for 15 innings and never score. They told me after the game that in Japan, at the end of 12 innings, the game's over either way, so everybody can go home on the trains and sevens. So if I could have made it through 1 more inning, at least I wouldn't have lost. But, so before that, I grew up, I was born in Philadelphia. I grew up in Delaware County. We moved from Philadelphia into Delaware County, into Clifton Heights, and then to Springfield. So I started playing when I was 6, 7 years old, coaches pitching, a little field down the street by the school. I really did live in a place where I walked to all 3 schools. I walked to elementary school, junior high, and high school. I didn't have to drive. We didn't have to drive anywhere where I lived. I got cut from my first baseball team when I was 10 years old. As you can see, it had no impression on me. I still remember it. Right? So I got cut when I was 10 years old. And yeah, you still got to play. You got to play in another team, but we had a travel team, and I didn't make that team. The next year I made that team, and we went on from there. My first year in junior high school, I didn't make the team. Right? The next year I made the team. Went to high school at Springfield High School. We ended up having a fantastic team by my senior year. And so I was the worst pitcher. We had 3 pitchers, and I was the worst one on the team. And when I say that, I'm not putting myself down. My ERA was .64. Our best pitcher was .2, and the guy in between was .6. So I was the worst of a pretty good pitching staff. We won the league, and our catcher was Mike Sosha, who's the manager for the Angels, who's had a fantastic career. He's the best high school player I ever saw. He was a whole different league from the rest of us, just a completely different situation. He was a sophomore when I was a senior. He was not going to start for us. He ended up being the first pick in the draft his senior year, and he wasn't going to be our starting catcher. We all thought the coach had issues, but it ended up, our first game of the year, the starting catcher was a junior. He got run over at home plate. It's like Lou Gehrig and Wally Pipp's story. He got run over at home plate, separated his shoulder, and never played again. Sosha took over from there. We were young, so we knew we were going to win. We had a good team. Out of the 9 hitters in our lineup, we had 7 guys hit over 400.
Wow.
Sosha hit over 600, and he did that all 3 years. So we knew, we kind of had with the pitching and the hitting, we knew we were going to win the league. We had jackets made with league champs like the second week of the season. we didn't wear them until it was over, but we had the jackets made. So again, back then there wasn't as much way to communicate with coaches and get scouted and those kind of things. So I was looking at Westchester and places like that, and ended up going to Bloomsburg. So initially I was supposed to play football and baseball, and I wasn't that good of a football player, so I'm not sure how that happened. But I was going to try and do both. When I went to Bloomsburg, I decided I didn't really want to play football. I just wanted to play baseball, and because it's all I ever really wanted to do. All I ever really wanted to do from when I was a tiny kid, and the only place I was ever comfortable was on a baseball field. When I played high school football in my junior year, I was so quiet that when I came to practice every day, the coaches, to try and get me to be more outgoing, made me go around every single day and say hello to every player and every coach on the team. All that did was make me madder. But anyway, I did it. So all I wanted to do was play baseball. I played football, I did other things, I played basketball. So when I went to Bloomsburg, I'm going to play baseball. I think I was there a week, and I was playing in a touch football game. So I decided not to play football and playing touch football. I broke my arm. So I'd never broken anything before. So I called my parents, and there were no cell phones, so I had to call them on the phone from the dorm room. And I call them on the phone, and my mother doesn't say, "How do you feel?" or "Is everything okay?" She says, "Which arm was it?" So I said, "It's my left arm." She said, "Okay, how's school going?" But they knew how much I cared about it. So at Bloomsburg right away, we didn't have a very good team. The state schools in Pennsylvania are pretty good. We didn't have a very good team. Our coach was a pretty neat guy though. So our coach, his name was Clark Bowler. He was 6'8". And at that time, he was in pretty good shape still. He was about 250 pounds. So a guy 6'8", 250 is in pretty good shape. He played football and baseball at Alabama. He played with Joe Namath at Alabama. The tough part was he was from Alabama. So it took you like a year before you could understand what he was saying. so my first year, he put me as a reliever. And it was the first game of the season, and he put me down in the bullpen to warm up. And he started yelling at me. He was coaching third, and he's yelling, "Hey!" And I had no idea what he was saying. So finally, one of the other guys, one of the veteran players, came running down to me, and I said, "What's he saying?" And he's saying, "How much do you lack? So how much do you need?" But I couldn't understand a word he said. Right? So then I ended up going in the game. We did okay my freshman year, and I did okay out of the bullpen pitching for him, so he let me start a game. And I got knocked out in the first inning, and he wasn't very happy about it. And we were on the road, we were staying in a hotel, and we lost the second game of a doubleheader. So he had a team meeting in his room. So we got a regular sized hotel room with 25 guys in it and 3 coaches. And he looks at me and goes, "This is what I get for starting a freshman in front of everybody else." And I'm like, wow, this is pretty harsh. Right? And then he pulled me over afterwards and said, "I was just trying to make a point. And I figured you could handle it." Right? Because the team that day just didn't have any effort in it at all. I pitched terrible. I was terrible. Okay? him and I ended up the next few years getting along really well. I'll tell you another story where we didn't get along too well, but the following year and the year after that, we got a little better. But my junior year, we were 2-28. We were terrible. We had a couple really good pitchers. We had myself and a guy named Rich Budwig who got drafted by the Yankees. And we would lose every game 2-1, 1-0, 3-1, right? So it was really bad. It was depressing. I wanted to quit. I wanted to stop playing altogether, right? That summer, I played on a bunch of different teams. I was getting paid $50 a game to play in these different leagues and those kind of things, and I needed the money. 4th of July weekend, I pitched in a game in a league in Delaware against a team from Delaware on Friday. And I pitched 9 innings and I beat them 2-1. On Saturday, I pitched against a team in Bloomsburg and I pitched 7 innings and I won the game. On Sunday, I pitched in a tournament in Harrisburg against the same team from Delaware again with somebody else's jersey on because I wasn't supposed to be allowed to play in this tournament, and I beat him again. Right? And after that, I quit. I just had enough. I didn't want to play anymore. For the first time ever, I didn't want to play anymore. And this is a story my daughter's probably never heard. That's why she was here. She's afraid she's going to miss something. But I just didn't want to play anymore. I had enough. I wore myself out physically, mentally, the whole thing. The season we had was terrible. And then we had a coach at Bloomsburg, Bob DeCarlos, who's now the athletic director at Oregon State. And him and I talked about it, and he said, just come back and see how it goes, right? So I did. Started playing, started getting into it again, got in shape, did everything we needed to do. We went to Florida. We had a little mishap on the way to Florida, and I'm not saying I'm proud of this little mishap, but we stopped and had a few beers, and we weren't supposed to do that, obviously. The coach found beer tabs in the van we were driving down. I was the captain of the team, so I was responsible for that van. So I lost. He took away the captain's thing from me, and that's what I was telling you. We had another little disagreement while I was there. But that year, we ended up winning a lot of games. I think until last year, we won the most games the school ever won in baseball. So it was we went from 28 losses to about 24 wins. And it was pretty much the same guys. We just played a little bit better, and that's all we really needed to do. So at the end of the year, we made a tournament called the ECAC tournament. We didn't qualify for the NCAAs, but we did pretty good. And during that tournament, a lot of scouts all during the season because of my roommate, the Budwig guy, and myself. And we were both expecting to get drafted. We were both told we were going to get drafted. In that tournament, again, similar story, and that's why I started out with the Japan story. They didn't watch how many innings you pitched, man. If you said you could pitch, they'd put you out there. So in that tournament, I pitched the first game of the tournament. I pitched in relief in the second game of the tournament. And I didn't pitch in the third game of the tournament, but I started again in the fourth game. But there were a bunch of scouts there in the third game, and they didn't know about what had happened before. And they thought there was something wrong with me. That's why I didn't pitch. So it comes to the time of the draft, which is in June, which is about a month after this tournament. And we were sitting around, a bunch of us, waiting for me to get drafted, and it didn't happen. I didn't get drafted. My roommate did. So we were excited about that, but let's face it, it was pretty depressing, right? Because I thought I was going to get to do what I'd always dreamed about doing. And now it looked like it's over. Because I'm not a junior, I'm a senior. So I don't have any other opportunities. This is it. I needed a few credits, maybe a semester's worth of credits, maybe a little less to graduate though. But my family, my parents had health issues, so I went this summer and coached an American Legion team up in Bloomsburg, then came back and worked for the fall semester, went back in the spring semester to help coach the team and finish my degree. So now we're in Florida again. We go to Florida, but this time I'm a coach, so we behaved ourselves. But I went down there, and the last day we were there, another team from Connecticut wanted to play us in a game. We already had a scheduled game with the team, so I told the head coach, and I hadn't been throwing that much, I told the head coach, I'll take the second team and I'll pitch for them. And we'll see how it goes. The game won't count, but they can play a game, our guys can play an extra game. We'll see how it goes. I hadn't been throwing that much. I've been throwing some batting practice. I was in pretty good shape, but I hadn't really been pitching. I don't know what happened. I ended up pitching the first 5 innings of the game. I struck out 13 guys. I was throwing mostly junk. I was throwing knuckleballs and all kinds of crazy stuff. So after the 5th inning, a bunch of scouts showed up, and they literally came over to me and they said, "Can you throw a fastball?" And I said, "Sure." So I went out in the 6th inning, and I threw all fastballs, and I struck out 3 guys on 10 pitches. And then that was it. I had nothing left after that. That just exhausted me because I wasn't in shape for that. So the next day, the Orioles scout and the Brewers scout came and offered me a contract. And when I mean offered me a contract, I mean they said, "You can come to minor league spring training and try out and see if you can make a team." And obviously I said, "Where do I sign? Get me out of here." So went home, they came to the house, we signed the contract, and I left for spring training in Arizona. So.
But what was the best part about Bloomsburg? That's where he met me. Oh, yeah.
I apologize.
I can't believe you left that out. Seriously. And honestly, since she brought it up, I better be good here. The toughest part then was I had to leave her to go to Arizona. But again, still, this is my dream, man. This is what I've always wanted to do. I never really thought it could happen, and then it's not going to happen, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, it happens, right? So I get a shot at this thing, and I have no idea what I'm getting into either. I got to tell you, I don't realize even that. I think I'm going right now to play for the Brewers. Right? I don't realize I'm really going there to try out with a minor league team. And so the first day we show up, there's 150 guys, all with the same dream, and all who can. Huh?
Do they all have contracts?
Yeah, they all have, and a lot of them are first-round draft picks and higher draft picks, and guys that have been playing for a few years and all that. And I'm like, holy cow, these guys can really play, right? And the first day, we go out on the field at 7:30 in the morning in Arizona, and it's beautiful there, right? But it's already warm in March. And we did calisthenics for an hour. Then we ran sprints and distance for 45 minutes. We had to go in and change. Then we went out and did 3 hours of practice, and then we ran again. So obviously when we left, and you do that for 6 weeks. But fortunately, then after the first couple of weeks of just doing that every day, you do the morning session, and then we started playing games. So I was fortunate in the games. I pitched really well. I pitched as good as I can possibly pitch. And so I made a team. I get to go to Burlington, Iowa for the summer. And so that was my reward. So I get to hop on a bus for 2 days with 30 guys, and we drive to Iowa, and I'm not kidding you, every so often, they pull the bus over, and we get out in the middle of nowhere and play catch and stretch, because they wanted us to keep loose, so that when we got there, we didn't get hurt when the season started. So then we get there, and we pull into Burlington, Iowa. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Burlington. Great people there. Iowa's a great place, but there's nothing there. So we pull up to the stadium right away. We're starting our first game the next day. There's snow on the ground. It's about 30 degrees. I felt like I was back at Bloomsburg, so I felt like I was at home. It was okay for me, but we had guys from California and Florida and places that had never seen snow. While we're on this trip, we got a catcher who his family's from Cuba,
6'4", 230 pounds, making snow angels out in the outfield of the stadium because he was just so caught up by all this snow that was there. They cleared off the field and we had practice after 2 days on the bus. We couldn't, there were 6 of us that they put you up in a hotel for 2 nights. We couldn't find a place to live. So 6 of us slept on the floor in the clubhouse. The clubhouse was about half the size of this room, and it was a concrete floor. And believe me, I'm not complaining. This was the great adventure. It was when I was 21 years old. I didn't want to be anywhere else. But 3 guys from the Dominican Republic, a guy from California, a guy from Maryland, and me. We didn't have blankets, pillows, nothing. The manager was sleeping in his office. He had a little office, maybe the size of that area. He had a cot he'd pull out and sleep in there at night. He slept there all season. So the managers in the minor leagues, it's a 24/7 job. So he was there 24/7. We were only there 12 hours a day. But not counting the bus rides, watching the corn grow in Iowa, that's all there was to do. But, and we found other things to do, but that was on the buses. So we slept on the floor there for 4 or 5 weeks. Finally, we found a house, and the house was tiny, right? And Lori finally came out to visit, and she can tell you the house was slanted. So if you put a ball down at the front door, it would roll out the back door of the house. But it was awesome for us. We had 2 bedrooms, we had a little kitchen and a TV. That was about it. That's all we really needed. We would walk home every night, and we'd stop at a 7-Eleven and buy a 12-pack of TV dinners. That was what we ate. Half the time we finished a 12-pack, and the dinners would be charcoal in the oven because we'd forget about them. And then we'd go to the ballpark the next day. So when she came out to visit, I was making $500 a month, by the way. So we had to pay for a place to live, we had to pay for food, we had to pay for everything. They didn't pay for anything. When we went on the road, we got $8 a day meal money. So $8 a day, you're not eating that well. They want you to eat well, but they're giving you $8 a day. So $500 a month, and you don't get paid until the 15th of April. The season starts on the 3rd. And you're coming, for most of us, a lot of us at that level are coming right from college. So none of us had any money. So there was a ground, like a bar, restaurant place in the parking lot that had peanuts and popcorn. We'd all throw in a buck, get a couple pitchers of beer, and before the games, we'd have a beer and popcorn and peanuts. That was our pregame meal. Because that's what we could afford at that time. We'd go on the road, we'd eat a little better because they gave us the $8. But Lori comes to visit, and they always told us, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So my kids all know that's still the way it is for us. We were 5 minutes early. So the bus was leaving at 7 o'clock for Wisconsin Rapids, and we got there at 5:00. The bus was gone. She was visiting at the time. So people thought that was the reason, but honestly, that didn't have anything to do with it. We just got a little bit late getting there. So we were obviously panicked. Well, we didn't have any choice. We had to get a flight out of Burlington, Iowa, so it was basically a crop duster, to Chicago, and then another crop duster to Wisconsin Rapids. We got there just in time for the game. So that cost us each $200. We got fined another $250 for being late. They told us if we didn't make it there in time for the game, it would have been $500. So we made it in time for the game. So now we got a month where I'm making $10 for the month because the rest of it went to a mistake. So obviously I was never late again for the next 10 years. So the first half of that season we played extremely well. I made the All-Star team, had a couple shots at no-hitters, never pulled it off, but had a couple games where I pitched really well. The second half of the year in that lower minor leagues, the draft comes, and they bring in all the high draft picks to that town. And they got rid of a lot of our guys until the last night before they were gonna cut people. So the toughest part about this game, people get sent home every day. And remember, it's what we all dreamed about our whole lives, and then one day they're gone. So the last night before this is gonna happen, our manager gets thrown out of the game. And back then, it was just the manager and us. I was the designated manager. So the manager tells me, I want you to go put my roommate in the game because we're gonna release him after the game. So it was a terrible night, right? So I had to put him in the game, and not only that, he pitched terrible, so I had to take him out of the game. And then he had to go in and get sent home afterwards. Right? So the second half of the year, after we made all these changes, we played terrible. It was just miserable. It was really long. So even when you're doing something like that, when you're losing, you want to win. And we couldn't win. We were terrible. But I made the All-Star team. I had a pretty good year. So as my reward for that, I got to go to the next level of the lower level, which was in Northern California. So I went from Burlington, Iowa, making the All-Star team, $500 a month. So I'm a prospect now. So I got $100 a month. So I'm making $600 a month, living in Northern California. It didn't quite work. So there were 6 of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment. We would take the mattress off, and one guy would sleep on the mattress, one guy on the box spring, one guy on the couch, and we had a guy that was 6'8", right, who slept under the kitchen table, because that way he didn't think anybody would walk on him. And we played fantastic. We won. We were 35-5 to start the season. We won in the minor leagues. They play halves. We won the first half easily. We just crushed everything. It was probably as much fun as I ever had playing baseball. The second half, we lost our first 5 games. So we came in the clubhouse after the game one night. You know, it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and there were 7 guys from Milwaukee. The guy who ran the minor leagues, the guy who was the pitching coordinator, the hitting coordinator, the base running coordinator, and they were all waiting for us when we came off the field. They didn't even let us shower. They made us all sit around, and they started yelling at us. And they went around the room in front of, with all of us in the room, they went around the room one at a time and told us how bad we were and what we were doing wrong. And I can't even tell you some of the things they said. But the worst thing they said was, we're going to start practicing every morning at 8 o'clock. And then we're going to practice again every day at 4 o'clock until you get back into first place. So the next morning at 8 o'clock, we were on the field practicing for 3 hours. We went and got something to eat, back on the field at 4 o'clock, played the game. We were back in first place in 10 days because we didn't want to do it anymore. It wasn't the practice. We just played as hard as we could possibly play. We ended up winning the league, won the championship. I have a ring from that. You get rings even in the minor leagues, which is really a neat thing. So as a reward for that, I get to go back there again the next year. And I room with a guy from Korea who doesn't speak English. So I'm rooming with a guy from Korea and another guy. It all works out great. After that season, they have a thing in the winter ball. So if they want you to, they take prospects to Arizona. So I went to Arizona again for another 6 weeks. Then I went to Mexico to play after that. So in that season, I pitched in over 100 games. And between all 3 of those seasons, we won the championship in Mexico. And that was, Lori wasn't there again. I missed her terribly, but she wasn't there. But we won the championship. It's like winning the Mexican World Series. So we played. We had a few drinks until about 4 in the morning, and then they came and told us we had to go to a breakfast banquet at 8 o'clock. We were still drinking. When we got to this banquet, they had drinks there for us. And the reason they did it in the morning is because we were all flying home that night. So I was supposed to fly from a place called Obregon, Mexico. I was going to fly to San Diego, and then from San Diego to Philadelphia. So there was 3 of us on the plane. One guy going to Northern California, one guy to South Carolina, and me. We were in the air no more than 15 minutes and the plane started going straight down. So we were still drunk, so we were just shaking hands. Oh, it's been great knowing you. Hey, at least we won the championship, right? And then the plane just went like this and stopped in the runway, and people are yelling and screaming. There's stuff flying all over the plane, right? Remember that was a plane 30 years ago too, so people were still smoking on the planes and all that stuff too. Right? So we get off the plane and we're in the middle of the runway, and they make us walk down all the way down the runway, from one end of the runway to this terminal, which is a small terminal, like a small airport. So we have no idea what's going on. My Spanish is pretty good, but I was still drunk, so my Spanish wasn't that good. So we finally figure out there was a bomb threat on the plane. So after we're in this airport now, remember, we haven't slept, we're still drunk. We're trying to make it home. We've had enough, we want to go home. I miss my wife. We weren't married, but I missed her anyway. But we get to the airport, we're there until 3 o'clock in the morning in the terminal. And they tell us, you can go to a hotel and shower, take a nap and come back. And we'll get the plane out of here first thing in the morning. So we go to the hotel, we just shower and went right back. We weren't taking any chances. We get back, and so we still haven't slept. Now it gets to be 9 o'clock in the morning. We're still sitting in the terminal. The plane's still sitting on the runway. The guys with the machine guns are not happy because we're yelling at them. So we decide we got to get out of here. We got to find another way to get out of here. So we tried to rent a car because there's no place to rent a car. We're trying to pay taxi drivers to take us to the border. It's a 4-hour drive. We finally found a taxi driver that would take us. We each gave him $50 and we started driving. Inside the border, there's a checkpoint 3 miles inside in Mexico before you get into the U.S. And they stop us and ask us for papers. We had no idea what they were talking about. We were supposed to have some kind of working papers, and we figured now we're in trouble here because we don't know what to do. And these are the federales. So again, these are the guys with the machine guns. Some guy comes running out, he's got an M16 in one hand and a boombox over his head like this. He's got a tape he recognized us, he's got a tape of the game. He's a big fan of the team, so he's jumping up and down, they made us listen to the game for a half hour. So then we finally make it to the Arizona border. We hadn't thought this through very much. We said, okay, now what do we do? So we walked across the border, so we're in Arizona, but we're still a couple hours from Tucson. So there's a Greyhound bus stop there. We went in there. They said, and there's no cell phones. So our people back home have no idea where we are. We were supposed to be home. We get Greyhound bus. We talk to them. He said, take the bus, go to this phone booth on this highway. From the phone booth, call the airport, get a taxi. They'll pick you up and take you. So we did. So we get to Tucson Airport about 5 o'clock on the second day. Got a flight scheduled. The guy from California gets a flight 20 minutes later. We got to wait till midnight to fly to Atlanta and then to Philly. So we started drinking again. But we got on a flight at midnight. We slept all the way to Atlanta. I had a little time to kill, so I walked the other guy. He was taking a small airline home. We walked over to this counter, and there's nobody behind the counter. So we finally found somebody, and what's with this airline? He's got a flight. They went out of business last night. I said, Tim, good luck. See you later. So I played in Mexico for 2 years. We won the championship that year. There's great people. We lived right in Mexico. Some of those stories that we can, I could go on for a long time. Some of the stories in Mexico. Then I went to Stockton again, El Paso, Texas. So El Paso again. Now we go to a cheaper place. So we're living like kings. I'm making $750 a month. We got a 3-bedroom apartment with balconies and all kinds. We each have our own bathroom. We thought we were kings except for the tarantulas and the scorpions. But so we won the championship again there. But the biggest thing that happened to me there, so I was kind of a borderline guy. I kept moving up. They liked me. But during that year, there was a guy, some of you people might know, there was Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich.
So Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich played for the Yankees back in the day, right? And they were both retired at the time. Mike Kekich was living in El Paso going to medical school. So Mike Kekich used to come over and throw batting practice. Mike Kekich and Fritz Peterson, when they played for the Yankees, swapped families. So that's what made them famous. So this guy Kekich was a little different. But he said to me one day, he said, "What do you do every day?" And I was our closer back then. It was just starting with the closer thing. And I was our closer, and I said, "Well, what do you mean? You know, I get up, I eat something, and I go to the ballpark. That's what we do." Right? He said, "No, I want to know exactly what you do every minute of the day." And he said, "I want you to try something for me. I want you to do the same thing every day." Well, what do I have to lose, right? So at the same time I did that, I said, I'm going to try and go a month without giving up a run. I went 3 months without giving up a run.
Wow.
Right? So it worked. So I got moved up to AAA that year for a little while, which was in Vancouver, where I couldn't afford to live at all. Right? So I lived with a couple that had a kid, and I slept on the couch for 3 weeks. And then I went back to El Paso because we were in the playoffs. Then we got married. But I got to tell you, that year I had a great year. So at the end of the year, they can bring people up to the big leagues in September, and I had a great year. And there was a lot of conversation: am I going to go? Am I not going to go? And I'm scheduled to be married in September. So what do? I tell the Brewers, "Hey guys, I need the weekend off to go get married." I don't know how that would have worked out. But at the same time that was going on, the Brewers made a trade for Don Sutton. So the Brewers traded Kevin Bass, Frank DiPino, and a player to be named later for Don Sutton. The Brewers in Houston were arguing over who that should be, me or another guy. So because I was involved with that, they couldn't bring me up. So I guess I got lucky. It worked out, right? So then we got married. I was home for a week. We got married, home for another week. We went to Puerto Rico. Played in Puerto Rico. Did we win the championship that year? Yeah, so we won the championship in Puerto Rico. On that team, we had guys like Sid Bream, Ozzie Virgil, who played for the Phillies, Tom Candiotti, who else? Dan Gladden, Randy Reddy, right? Tony Gwynn was on one of the other teams. Guys like that, right? Boomer Wells, yeah. So the next year, so because of all this, the next year I finally get to go to spring training with the big league team. And wow, it's a whole different deal. So the first day I'm standing out there with these guys, and again, if you go back to that first day in the minor leagues, and I'm thinking how good these guys are, well now I'm with the big league guys, it's a whole different deal, right? But somehow the pitching coach, a guy named Pat Dobson, took a liking to me, and he told me, he said, "I'm going to pitch you every chance I get." And so typically the relievers, some of you guys might know, in spring training, you go to some of the games, but you don't go to all of them. I went to every game. There's 25 games. I think I pitched in 16 games. And I think I gave up 1 run. It was phenomenal. And Raleigh Fingers was our closer, and Raleigh Fingers got hurt. So I made the team. So here I am, I'm going to California, right? We opened up with the Angels. And it's hard to believe, right? I made this thing, right? So she drives to California with a buddy of mine, right? We go there. I don't pitch in California at all. And on this team, I played with 4 guys on that team that are in the Hall of Fame. That team the year before went to the World Series and lost to the Cardinals. So we had Raleigh Fingers, Don Sutton, Robin Yount, and Paul Molitor, right? There was Don Money, who played here for the Phillies, and there were Jimmy Gander, Cecil Cooper, a lot of great players. So we started the season. Harvey Keene was our manager, and if you know Harvey had some health issues. He had lost a leg, different things. And so this is my first year, so we flew on a commercial flight
from California to Kansas City for our next series. And because I was the only rookie on the team, they made me sit next to Harvey in first class. So I sat next to Harvey, and he's telling me how when he played, they took the trains and how much better it was. How much more he enjoyed the trains because it was much more relaxing, more comfortable, dining cars, all that kind of stuff. He said, I don't know how you guys do it. How do you take all these plane flights and then play? Because we had a game the next morning, 1 o'clock. I said to him, I don't know. I've never done it before. No, he slapped me. No. But, so with Harvey, Harvey's a tough guy who's been through a lot. So 3 weeks later, I pitched my first game, like a week later in Toronto. And I can't tell you anything about the game. I was scared to death. It was cold, it was raining. I know I made it through 2 innings, but other than that, I don't remember much about it. Because my knees literally, when you talk about knees knocking, my knees were knocking. But like 2 weeks later, I had an ingrown toenail. Long story short, I had it taken out, and they had to take me in and do surgery. I got a couple stitches. It was on my right foot. So I went to the clubhouse that day. I didn't have a shoe on. And Harvey came over to me. Now, Harvey had his leg removed. And he says to me, "Are you okay? Is your foot okay?" So I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." So I put my spikes on and I went out there for practice. I took them off in between. It was bleeding. The trainers taped it up again. I put it back on for the game and went out to the bullpen. Right? And it started bleeding through my shoe. And after the game, he grabbed me again. He goes, "Do you think you can pitch tomorrow? Are you going to be okay?" So my point is, today they give you a couple weeks off. It was a different game. It wasn't me. So I was in Milwaukee for 4 years, and we never won. Things went downhill from there. I had some good games. I had some bad games. I threw a shutout against the Orioles. At one point against the Twins, I struck out 9 in a row one night. One more, I would have tied. Tom Seaver had the record at 10. If I would have gotten that last one, it would have tied him. It was a foul pop-up down the line, and our guys in the dugout were yelling at our first baseman to drop it. But he thought they were nuts, so he caught it, which was fine. But back to the minor leagues sometimes, and then back to the big leagues. And then there's this little draft thing, and I ended up with the White Sox in spring training. And I did pretty well. But they decided they wanted to go and do something else. So I got released. I got sent home. I got fired. Right? So here I am, I don't know, 29, 30 years old. Now what? Right? I got a wife and 2 kids and no job. And I don't exactly have great training for anything else other than this. So the guy that originally signed me with the Brewers is now with the Mets. He calls. I end up going to the Mets, and most of it in AAA in Norfolk, played there. We won the championship again there. And then at the end of that season, they tell me, we want you to become a coach. So I was 31, 31. I don't want to coach yet. And I end up signing with the Orioles, go to Rochester. We're playing in Nashville. It's early in the season in April, and I get a call. I got to run in from the bullpen, and it's an emergency. Your wife's on the phone. So I run in, and some of you know her. She's not bashful. So she goes, they called from Japan. They want to buy your contract. I told them, okay, we're leaving. I said, you can't do that. She's laughing just like that, right? So
a week later, we were in Japan.
yeah, so then, so I go back out, and the manager, Johnny Oates, was the manager who played and coached here in Philadelphia. Everybody on the team, you okay? Everything all right at home? The kid's good? Everything's fine. It's okay. So, like the 7th inning, now I'm warming up to go in the game, to close the game, and here comes the kid again. It's your wife again. She said it's an emergency. They want an answer tonight. So I said, okay. Now the guy that's trying to sell my contract in Japan was a guy from Milwaukee. So everything's connected. Networking in sports is no different than it is in anything else. A few years earlier, I had a bad game and I had yelled to him, "Ray, get me out of here, take me to Japan." So that night when I talked to him, he said, "You remember a couple of years ago when we tried to get you to Japan?" He said, "Well, I got a deal for you." So I flew back that morning to Rochester. We drove to Scranton, said goodbye to her family. Drove to Philadelphia, flew to California, signed a contract. Flew back to Philly, packed everything up, the kids, everything. Flew back to California and flew to Japan with a 3-year-old, almost 1-year-old. Right? And we had no idea what we were getting into. It was a fantastic experience. We lived in Tokyo. The first game I pitched, I told you about the last game, but the first game they asked me if I was ready to go, and I said, "Yeah, let me pitch." I had no idea what I was saying. I should have waited. We played the Tokyo Giants. So the Tokyo Giants are bigger than the Yankees there. So full house. They have bands playing. It was such a different experience. I walked the bases loaded. I ended up giving up a couple runs in the first inning. It was a circus, right? And finally, for the third out, the last guy hit a line drive to the third baseman. He didn't hit it that hard, and he dropped on home plate because he was so upset. So I wasn't exactly happy. So I ran up to home plate and started screaming at him to get up. He got up and he's apologizing and bowing and went back. And from there it was okay. But I adjusted. I had an interpreter all the time. Lori had an interpreter for about half the time we were there, and then she was on her own. I learned how to take the subways. We traveled all around the city, all over the country. I used to carry maps with me for cab drivers, and I'd say "Koko onegai shimasu," which meant "take me here," and I'd give them the map, and then I'd trust them to get me there. It was just a fantastic experience, and then we came back from there after that last game, and had a couple offers to keep playing, but I thought it was time to do something else. So we started a new adventure, work. And it was, we had a lot of fun. I met a lot of great people. Japan was certainly an amazing experience, right? We lived right in downtown Tokyo. So hopefully that wasn't too long.
Yeah.
You want some pop?
Hmm?
Yeah. You did good. It wasn't bad. When I first read, you say, anyone have a question or a comment? Yeah.
Who was the toughest hitter in this class in your
So Cal Ripken was terrible for me. I pitched against the Orioles a lot. I mean, we were in the American League East back then with them, and I pitched against them probably every time we played them. I pitched against him, and I could not get that guy out. Eddie Murray was after that, and Eddie Murray I had a lot of success with, but I struggled with Ripken. There was a guy named Davis. The other guy was a guy named Davis for Seattle, and I couldn't get him out. And I just didn't know what to do. And I asked Raleigh Fingers one day, I was pitching in a game, and Davis was up the next inning, and I said, "Raleigh, do you have any ideas?" He said, "Yeah, just throw it right down the middle, it might fool him." and I threw it right down the middle, and he popped it up. I think it was the only time I ever got him out.
Wow.
But in that shutout I threw against the Orioles, I got Ripken out. But that was that's the only time I think I ever got him out.
When you were in Mexico, was that winter ball?
Yes. So in Mexico they have during the summer they have the Mexican League, which they play pretty much all over the country with a lot of teams. There's 20 teams or so. But in the winter it's a much smaller group of teams. There's about 8 teams. And so the other thing that's unique there, when you make the playoffs, so we made the playoffs, we won it. So Fernando Valenzuela was the big thing then, right? So he played against us during the season, but once the season is over, you're allowed to pick up players from teams that didn't make the playoffs to play on your team. So we picked up Fernando. I was wearing number 34 all year. Fernando's number 34. So they came to me and said, "You have to change your number." And I said no. So Fernando was so big, we had him pitch the first game of the playoffs. They flew him in in a helicopter.
into the bullpen. He warmed up and he comes out of the bullpen, so he's wearing 34. I'm wearing 34. We're both have the same number. So he's pitching the game. And in the seventh inning, you can tell he's getting tired, and we're winning 1-0. So in the eighth inning, the manager tells me, the manager was Jimmy Williams, who was here with the Phillies, best manager I ever played for. He was here with the Phillies. He said, go out and start getting ready. He's tired. Right? So I start warming up. The fans just seeing me go out there were not happy because they want to see Fernando. So I go out there and I start warming up. He gets a guy out. He walks a guy, walks another guy. Bases loaded, 2 outs. The manager goes out, takes Fernando out, and brings me in, and we're winning 1-0 in the top of the eighth inning. I thought they were going to kill me, right? So I was almost scared, other than I had to concentrate on the hitter. So luckily, the hitter was Mario Mendoza, who bad hitting has been named after Mario Mendoza. The Mendoza line, right? He's a great guy, great shortstop, but not that good of a hitter. But naturally, I went 3-0 on him. The fans were climbing the fences. I mean, they were going nuts. I came back and struck them out. By the time I walked off the field, they were singing songs about me. And then we ended up winning the game. And then Fernando and I ended up sitting in the training room together, having a few beers. But yeah. So that year they had a Caribbean World Series after that. So usually Mexico, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and the Dominican play off after that to see who's the best. They canceled it that year. There was something going on in Nicaragua at the time, and there were some issues, so they didn't have it. 2 years later in Puerto Rico, we played in the Caribbean World Series, but it was great baseball. I mean, they can really. I learned a lot playing in Mexico. When you're playing in the Northeast here, we don't get to play as much as the guys from California and down south. So playing in the winter helps you catch up to them.
How did you learn to play as a child? In other words, you weren't just born in a ninth grade pitcher.
So, my father, his thing was really football, but I got to tell you, we really didn't have a yard. Our yard was a 6x6 square, but we had a driveway. So I probably threw to my father every day in the driveway. And some days we would go up to the field and hit and field and all those kind of things. But for the most part, it was really throwing in that driveway and my father telling me to watch games on TV. So I'm not saying I didn't have some good coaches along the way too. I certainly did. But I will tell you, the best coaching I got was when I got into the pro teams where those guys, there's a reason why the guys in the big leagues are that good. They have great coaches. So I learned a lot as I got there, but the preparation for that started in the driveway, hours after hours with my father with his bruised knees and other things. Right? But that was really it. And then playing around the neighborhood back then, I know we all talk about the kids aren't out playing in the parks and stuff. We did that. I think they're still playing just as much. They're just playing more organized than we did. But I think that's it. We learned from each other. We learned from some coaches. I had my high school coach played a year in the minor leagues with Willie Mays, so he had some knowledge. And then you're playing, when you're playing, even though Mike Scioscia was younger, he was so good. We learned stuff from watching him, even though he was younger than us. It just came so naturally to him. And then in college, the head coach wasn't very good, but the Carolus guy I mentioned, who's the athletic director out at Oregon State, he was a really good coach. And so that helps. But it's really a ton of practice. You have to love practice.
How, do you ever have any arm trouble in your career? I like a lot of pitchers have today.
Yeah, so.
And was the mound as high when you pitched as it is today?
Yeah, so the mound's the same. They lowered the mound. We were talking about Bob Gibson, the other Bob Gibson, right? So when Bob Gibson and Denny McClain back in '68 had those great years, they lowered the mound to 10 inches, and it's still the same now. Now teams still cheat on that, just so you know. So the Dodgers mound is still higher than 10 inches, and the mound in Milwaukee is still lower. So they still play games with that. And if the other team complains, they'll fix it. But
it's a little, so I played for 10 years, and I never spent a day on the DL. I think it's a lot
If
more
you
than
think it's the way pitchers are being taught to throw today,
I think,
puts more on stress.
I think there's some of that. I think there's some of that, and some of the conditioning they're now doing, I'm not real fond of. We learned how to do things and got in shape by throwing and running. I'm not saying, we started to lift some weights then, but it was much different today. They're so much stronger. I think they're putting a lot more stress on things. And you look at it even today, they're fantastic. These guys today are way better than we were. I'll tell you that, they're way better. But they're not staying as healthy.
And was one of your pitches a fastball?
Yes.
What was the fastest you ever pitched?
So by the time, it's interesting, it's an interesting question, because the fastest I ever threw was probably in the minor leagues. So on a couple of times, at different times in the minor leagues, I could 95, 96. But by the time you get to the big leagues, you learn how to pitch more, and you use your other pitches more. So as you learn how to, when you're throwing a fastball, you're trying to get your arm longer, longer, longer. As you start throwing those other pitches, your arm goes shorter, shorter, shorter. So the guys that throw the hardest in all of baseball aren't in the big leagues. On average, those guys are in Double A. So the guys in Reading, probably on average, their velocity on their pitches is faster than anybody else. But by the time I got to the big leagues, I was probably 89 and 92, somewhere around there. Right? On a given day, could I do better than that? Maybe. But again, with those guys, the hitters in the big leagues don't care how hard you throw it all. We took the pitching machine one year in spring training and cranked it up to 110 miles an hour, and they could hit it. Right? I'm not telling you they could hit it every pitch, but they could hit it.
They just timed it.
Yes.
They timed it. I guess the most successful pitchers were the ones that could place it properly, change the speeds.
Yeah, so a guy like Nolan Ryan, so in the first half of his career, he was a good pitcher. And once, he was throwing 105 miles an hour then, and he was good. But when he came to, it just sounds ridiculous, but when he started throwing as low as 100, he was a much better pitcher. He started using his other pitches.
Look at Jamie Moyer.
Yes, great example.
Yeah, hits every corner, every.
It's about where you throw the ball and changing speeds on those guys. They don't care. They're not afraid of the ball. They're not afraid of how fast you throw. Right? If you don't do other things, you're not going to get them out. Right? And they know that too.
Are you left-handed or right-handed?
I'm right-handed. I've always joked if I was left-handed, I'd still be playing. Right? Because there's more lefties again now than there. But when I was playing, the other thing, we only had 10 pitchers.
Right.
Today, a lot of teams carry 13. So I think we only had one left-handed pitcher.
Well, don't they now prefer left-handed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've always looked. Bob McClure, the pitching coach for the Phillies, and I played together in Milwaukee. So he was our one lefty. And he used to joke, right, that he was going to play 20 years, take 5 years off, and then play another 10. Right? And he played, I think he played 22 years. But a lot of that is, he started, he relieved with the left-handed, and he didn't throw very hard. He was similar to Jamie Moyer's or another. But if you're left-handed, there is definitely an advantage to that.
What was your repertoire of pitches?
So if I started a game, I'd throw a fastball, curveball, changeup, slider. If I relieved, it would be fastball, slider, and changeup. And whichever one was better, the slider or the changeup, on that day would probably be the only one I'd use. So it depended on the game and what was working. And there's days where you go out there, I pitched a game one time and I couldn't throw my fastball for a strike. So I threw way more sliders than fastballs. So my fastball was kind of wasted, and then threw sliders for strikes. But it was mostly, I throw mostly fastballs, and then either a slider or a changeup and a curveball occasionally when I started. Now, when I started, I threw a curveball. Now, we were talking about the arm thing. So I didn't really throw a curveball right away until somebody taught me the right way to throw it. I threw a knuckleball, like it's an off-speed pitch, which puts no strain on your arm at all.
Right.
So maybe that helps some that I never got hurt. I don't know. I mean, I still throw a lot. but I
What do you
want,
think about the sinker with the approach?
the sinker is okay if you throw it properly, but if you force it, you put strain on yourself. Correct. And that's unfortunately, the drive for certain things is forcing people to try and do things they probably shouldn't do, right? With their arms, instead of doing what comes naturally. So if a sinker's natural to you, it's okay.
How many innings did you average per year in the majors?
So in the majors, not a lot, maybe, 75, somewhere around there, because I threw mostly relief. Like I said, and it was more games. So for those years I played winter ball, I threw in over 100 games 4 years in a row. But you're young, you don't care, and you're trying to get somewhere, so. And plus, I didn't, again, we're talking about I'm making $500 a month playing here. I was getting paid $3,000 a month cash to play in Mexico and Puerto Rico. So.
What about Japan?
Japan, the contract I signed was better than any of the contracts here. And that last game was interesting. So I had pitched the third to last game of the year, I had pitched that game. And I didn't pitch very well, but I made it into the seventh inning. I lost the game. And so the last day of the season, so 1 day's rest, the manager from the team in Japan came up to me and said, do you want to pitch tonight? Yes. Now he knew what I knew. I had an incentive in my contract. And if I got one more win, I made that incentive. I pitched 12 innings and lost 1-0. So I didn't get the incentive. I didn't earn it, right? But he told me after the game, he told me, he said, you've been good to us. So we're going to give you a shot at this thing. Right. So they were good about that kind of stuff. I pitched a game earlier in the year in Japan. And they do, they're doing this thing all year with Jeter retiring. So it's taking all year for Jeter to retire, and every night they're giving him stuff. In Japan, they would do one game for the guy. And the guy would basically not even be playing, but they'd bring him back to play one game. So I was pitching a game in Hanshin, and they came up to me before the game and they said, it's so-and-so's retirement game. He hasn't played for 2 months. All you need to do is throw him fastballs. So what they're telling me is, look, guys like that can hit a fastball. So they're telling me, let him hit the ball. So his first time up, I'm trying so hard to throw it down the middle, he grounds out. Second time up, I'm throwing down the middle, he grounds out. Third time up, I'm trying so hard. I'm throwing like half speed, and I walked them. The fans are booing. It was in their stadium, so they think I walked them on purpose. I'm trying to help the guy. He gets to first base. I look over at him, and he tipped his hat. He knew what I was trying to do. We were losing at that point 2-1. We came in the bottom of the inning, and we scored 3 runs. And at the top of the next inning, the manager comes over to me and goes, I'm going to take you out. And he said, you understand, the reason we're going to win this game is because when you do the right thing, you get rewarded. Right? So they put a lot of stock in doing the right thing. Right? And I couldn't get him a hit, though.
Just two questions. The quality of ball and strike umpiring in both the major leagues and the minors. And then the second thing is, if you look at what happened with Jackie Robinson, how much racial bias against black players and then Spanish players who can't speak English and what they had to go through.
So she's shaking her head no. So the players, I'll answer that one first. So obviously what those guys went through was horrifying. Right, and some of the players and the coaches, I talked to those guys about separate hotels and separate restaurants, and even the players treated them badly. It was a bad deal. By the time I played, the players, no issue there. The players, even with the Latin players, with the black players, no issue whatsoever. Korean players, right?
No issue at all. With the fans in certain places, still issues. There were places we went that we would get very upset with the fan base. And I played in Arkansas back then. The stands were still segregated, right? It wasn't, I'm not sure it was intentional, there wasn't signs up, but it was intentional. So we've come a long way with that, and the players are okay. Now, culturally, you know, we're seeing some of the stuff with Adrian Peterson and what's going on there, and culturally, you know, there's sometimes some divides there on things, but I think as far as when I was playing, the players, it was okay, management, it was okay, it was all good. But again, yeah, with the fans, there's definitely, we had some issues because of my name. Right. Some interesting comments. What was the first question?
Quality of umpiring, minor leagues, and
So-
ball strike for you specifically.
Yeah, so I think the umpires are fantastic. I gotta tell you, I'm not saying they're right all the time, but considering what they're trying to do, I think they're awesome. I think they have the toughest job in the game to me, and I think they do really good. In the minor leagues, they're not as good. Some of the umpires in the big leagues get an attitude. You know, a guy like Joe West and some of these other guys. They cleaned up a bunch of those guys a few years ago. I think they're better now than they were. So when they purged some of the guys, they cleaned it up a little bit.
What do you come down on the argument on designated hitter?
So, yeah, one of the things that was really good for me as a pitcher, when I played in high school, we used wood bats. When I played in college, we used wood bats. When I left high school, they started using aluminum. When I left college, they started using it, so I never had to face those things. So that's a bonus for me. The DH, when they first started it, I hated it. I wanted to hit like everybody else, right? And our college coach, it started when I went to college. And so they DH for us, and I just hated it. It was terrible. Once you get used to it, it's a great thing. I don't have to worry about going up there anymore. Spring training or in the minor leagues, if you're playing for an American League team, and you're playing, the home team is a National League team, the pitchers have to bat. So 1 year in spring training, I came into a game and we're playing the Cubs at their home field. And I wasn't paying attention to who was pitching for the other team because I don't have to bat. They come up to me, you're up, you're leading off the inning. What? So I put a helmet on, they give me a bat, I walk up there and I look out to the mound and it's Lee Smith. The guy's 6'6", he's throwing 100 miles an hour. Right? But as far as the game, I like it without the DH. As a pitcher playing without it, I like that. Watching the game, I prefer they didn't have it.
Didn't have it.
Yeah.
More strategy, I guess.
Yeah, there's more to the game, right?
Yeah,
How would you feel about electronic balls and strikes?
Yeah, I don't like it. Maybe it's because I'm an old school guy. I think the whole game, part of the game is all of that play between the umpires and the fans and the whole thing. It would eliminate a part of the game. I'm sure they could do it. They could probably do it right now. But I just kind of like the whole thing. Right? There's this weird kind of relationship with the umpires and the players. So it's an extreme love-hate relationship.
You have to work the umpire more, but
Correct.
you are in a key situation, you throw a strike and it calls out a ball for whatever reason. And, you can set up the pitch, you've done all kinds of things, and now what do you do?
Correct. And some of the players, I faced Joe Morgan his last year. So Joe Morgan, obviously a Hall of Fame player, and he's about this tall. So he's hard enough to pitch to anyway. It's like trying to throw a strike to this bottle. Right? But, so his last year, if he decided to walk, the umpires wouldn't call a strike. Especially, I'm a rookie, so I threw 3 pitches right down the middle. Ball 1, ball 2, ball 3. I just threw the next one, I don't know where it went, ball 4, he went to first base. But the umpires will also, if you don't make a big deal out of that, the next hitter, they'll try and help you out. So that relationship thing you're talking about is still alive.
I have a strange question for you. How were you as far as a hitter?
So growing up, I could hit, but by the time I left college, it was a disaster. Right? Because they don't even let you, so I don't know if you know this or not, these guys don't even practice. So like the Phillies pitchers, the relief pitchers, maybe hit once a month in batting practice. The starting pitchers hit the day they're gonna pitch and maybe one other time. So when you don't practice it, and then you go up there and you face Lee Smith, you don't have much of a chance, right? You're just hoping that Lee Smith doesn't hit you.
Hit you.
Did you see much steroids or other illegal substances when you were playing?
So as far as illegal substances, yes. As far as steroids, it was just starting. So Canseco was just getting going, right? So Canseco went, I'm not accurate on these numbers, but Canseco was in AA, the next 2 levels down from the major leagues, and hit like 15 home runs. And he's 6'4", but he weighed like 175 pounds. That winter, he came back, and he was still 6'4", but he weighed 230 pounds. So he went to AA again, and in the first 2 months, he hit 20 home runs. He went to AAA, hit another 20, and went to the big leagues. So we went to Oakland to play them, and we were in the hotel bar, and we used to run into football players and those kind of things. And I said to somebody, "Is that one of the Raiders?" And they said, "No, that's that guy Canseco." He was just enormous. So that was kind of the start of it, and it was nowhere near. It wasn't anywhere near to what it eventually became. Right? I still go back and forth. I really don't. I don't like it, but I also kind of understand it. Like I heard Mike Schmidt say one time when he was playing, if it was there, he'd have probably done it too.
As a retired player, what is your relationship with Major League Baseball today?
My wife takes care of that. No, not much.
Any kind of involvement?
Yeah, so I'm a lifetime member of the Players Association. I'm a lifetime member of the. After so long, they don't make you pay dues anymore. You're automatically a lifetime member. So there's some things we get some, but I decided when I stopped playing that I wanted to move on. A lot of the guys that I played with are still involved in coaching, most of them. I'm one of the few guys that decided to take a different route. They used to call me for a few years and try and get me to coach. She loved baseball life, so she wanted me to do it, but I wanted to move on to something else. The other thing that happens when you do that, it's hard to keep, you're all over the country, so it's hard to keep track of people. A couple of years ago, two of the guys I played with ended up living in Spartanburg, South Carolina, right? The one of them's from California, one from Michigan, they ended up living there. We went down to visit them. And they said to me, "Why are you here?" I told them I came down to make sure all these stories I've been telling for all these years are true. Right? So I needed somebody to confirm it.
This may sound like a loaded question, but in your experience, who was the best player you've ever played with or were involved with?
So it's a really, so I played with Robin Yount. Yount was the youngest guy ever to get 1,000 hits, 2,000 hits. He was the best teammate you could ever ask for. He could run. He was an MVP and at shortstop. He was an MVP as a center fielder. Just a fantastic. So I played with him. So I gotta lean towards him. As far as pitcher, I don't really know. Pitching wise, again, Raleigh Fingers was again, I played with him, and he's in the Hall of Fame, but he was absolutely amazing. All of us would work out all winter. He didn't practice at all. He would come in, 30 pounds overweight and take spring training to get better, and then pitch against us. But the most amazing single performance I saw was Ron Guidry. So Guidry pitched for the Yankees and had several good years. So we went there one night and we had a really good team. We were in first place at the time, and this was August, and he shut us out 1-0. And the last pitch he threw was a changeup. It was the only changeup he threw all night. Our guy, Ben Ogilvy, who led the league in home runs the year before, swung and fell down. It was the most amazing performance I saw. And what made it more amazing, the next day I got to meet Guidry. He's one of the smallest people you ever saw. Right? And I mean, he couldn't have weighed 150 pounds. Right? And was throwing the ball 94 miles an hour. And so as a one-time thing, and it was just incredible. Now, my first win in the big leagues, Ben Ogilvy, for us, hit 3 home runs. So he's my favorite guy.
How do you account for Rivera with his career throwing essentially one pitch and then can't?
Yeah, I can't. He's an alien.
It's just.
Yeah, so Mariano Rivera, right, with throwing, one pitch. I think guys like him, guys like Nolan Ryan, Babe Ruth, you can go through any sport. Michael Jordan, I just think they're aliens. I mean, there's no other way to describe it, because you can talk about hard work, you can talk about anything you want to talk about, right? But everybody's working hard, everybody's trying, right? But now I will say this, his mechanics, so the actual execution of his windup was flawless, and he was able to repeat it because of that. But it makes no sense.
It's astonishing.
You just know exactly what's coming and.
Yes, and fun to watch, but it makes no sense.
And the right-handed is actually hitting better than the left-handed because the ball came in, and the switch hitters ended up hitting right-handed against him.
Right.
But he couldn't get the Red Sox. The one team that you talk about one player, he always had.
Yeah, and there's always weird things like that, right, with teams.
But it was astonishing to watch him
Yeah,
year after year after year.
Yeah, it made no sense. I can't explain stuff like that. If we could figure that out, we could all make a lot of money.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, thirsty?
No, I'm good.
Like a cold drink?
Thank you.
Thank you.